Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Mom on the Verge podcast, where I aim to help you improve your sense of joy, purpose, and meaning in this life. We will talk about a lot of different ways we can do this, but ultimately, we'll be working toward finding our way back home to ourselves and remembering that even in the most challenging times, peace is only a breath away. I am your host, Katie Farinas, a mom, nurse, and yogi on a mission to improve mental health and build community in our world. Hi, everybody. Before we begin the show, I just wanted to take a moment to let you know about all the different ways that you can take this show and what you learn from this show and expand on it. So I have a newsletter. I think I've mentioned that on various episodes, but I just want to put that out there. Each week I send out a newsletter, usually expands on the topics that we discussed in the show that week. I do sometimes also send out additional inspirations and things that come to mind every once in a while. So I would really highly encourage you to get on the email list so that you can dive deeper into the topics that we're talking about on the show, get those inspirations, and also get any offers that might come down the pike as far as little workshops that I might be having, little online events, in-person events, things like that. I also have my free guide that is mindfulness for mamas. So very simple ways you can add mindfulness into your everyday life, ways that don't take any extra time, ways that are easy and incorporated into things that you do every day anyway. And it's just giving you suggestions on how you can bring mindfulness to the things that you're doing anyway. And that mindfulness is really the gateway. It's the key to living in the present moment. And living in the present moment is the key to releasing overwhelm, anxiety, burnout, and creating the space that you need to be able to hear your intuition and to live with much more ease and flow in your life. So that is free. You can download it from my website. It's right on that first page when you enter my website. So take a look at that and maybe sign up for that. The newsletter also, you can sign up for the newsletter through my website, momoftheverge.org. And then lastly, I have a Discover Your Dharma workbook. So this is a workbook that will help you start to move in the direction of discovering why you are here, why your soul came to this earth at this time with these skills and talents and interests, and what you're meant to do with all of that, how you're meant to combine all of that for your greatest joy and also for the service of others. So when you're in your Dharma, when you're living your Dharma, you have the most impact. You are the most joyous. You have the most energy. You are excited and lit up and determined and all the things that we want to be in our lives. And your life just feels more magical. And many of us have been trained out of our Dharma. So this is a little workbook that helps guide you back toward that path so that you can live a life that feels really authentic and aligned and magical and joyous and impactful and fulfilled. And that is also available through my website, but I also put the links in all of my show notes. So either momoftheverge.org or the links in my show notes will get you to any of those things. So I invite you to check them all out. Go lean towards what feels most authentic for you in this moment, and keep showing up and listening and learning and growing and being the amazing woman, mom, human soul that you are. All right. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the show. All right, Kristy, welcome to the show. Welcome to Mom on the Verge. Thank you for being here. You and I were just chatting a little bit before I started recording, and then we said, wait, we need to capture this. So we stopped, and here we are. Kristy and I think are soul sisters. We could probably talk forever. So this is going to be a great conversation. Welcome. And could you start us off by just telling us a little bit about what you do?
Yes, thank you so much. And I'm so glad we finally were like, let's start recording.
Yes.
Now everybody gets like that from us. So that's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So my name's Kristy Mandour, and I started a company called So to Speak, SOW to Speak. in 2018. And it started as a presentation coaching company and evolved into encompassing much more of personal, professional development in the workplace, specifically with leadership, specializing in emotional intelligence and actionable mental wellness. So there's a huge communication umbrella over it. So sometimes I'll say, oh, I'm a communication coach, but it's communication, we all know, is so huge that I was like, you know what, really, it's understanding yourself more through emotional intelligence, which we can get into, and pairing that with actionable mental wellness, because insight without integration does jack squat.
Right.
We need both. Yeah, and so if you have an insight and then you're able to find actionable ways to apply it and integrate it into your life, especially as a leader in organizations, then you have impactful, like, intention or intentional impact, however you want to say it. And it's so funny because it almost organically decreases your stress levels as a leader because you're focused and you're not overwhelmed. So that's really, in a nutshell, there's a lot of mindset in it, but it really is to help leaders, high achieving leaders, find ways to enhance the impact they want to make while also decreasing their stress levels at the same time.
So I love that. And I particularly love the piece where you're saying integrating like this awareness with what to do with it, because I think you're so right. Like you can come to have this, point of awareness or this enlightened moment. And then you're like, now what? Like, what do I do with this? How do I move forward with this? So giving them actionable steps and integrating it, I think, is amazing. And I know you particularly work with leaders in companies, but it seems to me, the way you describe the work, that this could be used in any area of your life, like as a partner, as a parent, as a friend, like anywhere.
It can. And what I've noticed consistently, the majority of leaders that I work with, my target audience tends to also be parents. They just do. And that was partly when I was doing my ideal client. It's not that I am saying, if you're not a parent, I'm not going to work with you. Of course not. But there was the sense that I noticed there was a lot of stress on work-life balance, this very foggy, unattainable work-life balance. And it tended to lean more towards those who were very high achieving, very heart-centered leaders, and also cared about their kids and their partner. And so and what I noticed from clients is the work we do that is within organizations, 9 times out of 10, they'll tell me, I've noticed such a difference at home. And that's, how can they not,
Right.
And one thing that you said that we also were talking about offline is insight without integration oftentimes becomes a hall pass. Like we were talking about permission, right? And I always say, like, okay, so you're self-aware. It doesn't give you the opportunity to be a Dick or a Jane. I always say, like, it's, what I mean? Like, you don't get to just go, well, that's just, you can do it. But it's like this obnoxious shrug, like, that's just how I am. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like, no, the point is to raise your awareness so that you can, without judgment, even though we usually do have those cringy, grossed out moments of like, oh, sure. But then to lean into more of an acceptance, like, what is it about this that I'm judging? And then you get to unpack from more of an observant standpoint. I don't like this, that I do this behavior, or I do love that I do this behavior. And if you are getting insight on how you behave, whether it's a passive aggressive behavior, which happens a lot in the workplace, you can then start to change it versus going, well, that's just how I am. If I get pissed off, I just won't email the person back for 5 days.
Yeah.
You could do that. But then when you wake up a little bit more, you realize, oh my gosh, this actually is really negatively impacting the team. And the majority of clients I work with, if not all of them, they care. They don't want to be the one that's doing that,
Right. They just don't know how to manage their emotions around it, or how to figure out how to get past whatever it is they're feeling that upset them, that made them not want to email this person back. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, partly. I don't know if it's a straight arrow answer. I feel like it's because a lot of times it's also just having the comfort and the safety to admit their truth. A lot of people feel really uncomfortable to just admit why they're doing what they're doing. Some people really, I give people a lot more credit that people do know what they're doing. They just may not want to admit why they're doing it.
Mhm.
And some people are totally, I mean, we know this, you know, this 5% of us is conscious and 95% is unconscious until you start working, you know, to
Mhm.
change the percentages. And so at the same time, sure, there is a deep amount of our behavior that is subconscious or unconscious. At the same time, a lot of times we do know why we're doing what we're doing. We just don't want to admit it. So I often say, like, you have to gross yourself out to grow. It's par for the course.
Mhm.
Everybody, that's like rite of passage. It actually means you're on the right path for yourself. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean do a U-turn. And sometimes I'll say to people, maybe it does mean to do a U-turn right now. Like maybe right now at this space in your life, you don't have the capacity to do this work right now because it's just a pain in the ass. And you know what? That's okay.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when you allow them to give themselves that permission to go back to it's so counterintuitive, Katie, but like they actually notice shifts happening because they've given themselves the permission to go, no, if I'm honest with myself, I don't have the bandwidth to do this work right now. I'm going to put
Wow.
it down.
Yeah. That's really good. I mean, that's amazing having that awareness because once you can't unknow something. So they may
Right.
know they need to do this work. They may know that this is not the moment that they have the capacity to do the work, but they'll never unknow that they need to do the work. So when they're ready, they can come back and do it. And they'll actually get benefit out of it because I would assume you're not going to get a lot of benefits like therapy. You're not really going to get a lot of benefit out of doing this work if you're really not in it. If your heart's not in it, your mind's not in it, you don't have the energy or the capacity to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I would even say too, they don't have to, they don't need to do it. Sometimes when we say like we need to do this, there's a sense of guilt underneath that's pushing us to do it. It's more, and that's something I'll play with them around with too, is wording. And I'm like, listen, you don't want to be a stickler to every word you say, although at the same time, what we say to ourselves does deeply matter. So the more you can pay attention to like, I need to call that friend back. I need to make sure my kids eat healthy meals. I need to start stepping up in meetings at work, and it starts putting this insane amount of pressure. Like if you really pay
Yeah.
attention to your internal to-do list of what you need to do,
Yeah.
it makes you, you're going to laugh or cry. You know what I
Right.
mean? You're
Right.
going to be like, this is insane. Who the hell, who made this list up? And you're like, oh, that was me.
Right.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's funny. Who do I think I am? Like, this is
Right.
ridiculous.
Exactly how many of me are there?
Exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
100%. It makes me think of that old school movie with Michael Keaton, Multiplicity, where he like multiplied himself. It
I don't
probably,
think I saw that,
it
but
was good.
I used to tell my kids when they were really little, they're older now, but you know, when you have little kids, and they're always like, Mom, can you do this? Mama, 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 mama. And I used to say, guys, I wish I was an octopus. I wish I had 8 arms and could do 8 separate things at one time. Unfortunately, humans only have 2. So everyone's gonna have to wait.
I
But
love that.
but yes, I know we have these lofty goals about what we think we can accomplish. And I do it to this day. I do it to this day. I am a very organized person and I have plans for my day about what, you know, what I would like to accomplish. There is never a day that I accomplish everything on that list. And it has taken a lot of work on my part to let that go. I'll be like, that's okay. It's all okay. Like it's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of internal and external pressure for
Yeah.
sure. And I feel like one of the biggest opportunities versus necessities is it really is freedom. Like it gives you, that's what I keep every time when I'm, no matter what type of person I'm working with, because I work with men and women, mainly in organizations that do have high achievers. Like right now I'm working with different industries. It's very cross industry. The through line is that they're high achieving leaders who want to make a difference and they want to be good parents and they want to be great partners and they want to be great community citizens. And it's like, hold your
Yeah.
roll for a minute.
Yes.
Wow. This is a lot. It's great,
Yeah.
but it's also a lot of pressure. So
Yeah.
when they say, I need, I lean into like, you could, like, I need to call, you could call your friend back. Like what happens when you change that to, I'm choosing to call my friend back because I care about our friendship, or I'm choosing to text her later instead of responding right now because she's not going to get the best response from me. Or I'm going to choose to speak up in that meeting because I have something to offer, or I'm going to choose to actually let my kids choose their meal once or twice a week and we can have fast food, and the rest, 75% of the time it's health. Oh my gosh. And then you can feel like an internal heavy weighted
Yes.
jacket just get dropped.
Yeah.
And it's practice. You can easily get swept into like the most intricate. Oh my gosh, I feel like such a horrible mom because I bought cupcakes instead of making cupcakes, or for the homeroom, or for the Valentine's party or whatever. Or my gosh, I didn't offer to help out more at work. Like it can get into a runaway train.
Yeah.
So I look at it like the more you can strengthen your emotional intelligence and the more you can apply it to what works for you and your lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
the more you'll stick with it. But if you look at it like one more thing to do, it's
Horrible.
overwhelming.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Horrible. I love that. I mean, because basically you're kind of cutting off the anxiety spiral, right? If because
Yes.
they say, okay, I should call my friend back. Well, there's a whole story going on in your head about why you should call your friend back and what will happen if you don't call your friend back. But it's really just a story in your head. And it's not reality. So what you're just by even switching that one word, I feel like it helps like detach from that story that's associated with the word should.
Yeah, it does. I mean, should is connected. You hear all the time. I think Sex and the City made it famous with, stop shooting all over ourselves. That was like a big one. Should is connected a lot to guilt. Like I
Mhm.
should do this. We're not going to all stop saying should. I hear myself say it all the time. I'll
Yeah,
like, oh, I should have, or I should have. I do catch it though.
right.
So to me, that's the most important piece. It's to catch it, to go, oh, that was kind of cool. I just literally heard myself say, huh, okay. And now
Yeah.
and just from that noticing in 2 seconds, opening your cupboard and noticing, I should have bought more cinnamon toast crunch. I mean, even that like little
Yeah.
gives you a bit of freedom because
Yeah.
it's like that famous quote by Viktor Frankl, which I recently heard was not actually his original quote, but that's a
Mm.
different story. But the quote of with every stimulus there is
A response.
yes, well there's this,
Mhm.
and then there's the space in between, right? I'm
Mhm.
botching it, but
Mhm.
pretty much what he's saying is there's always going to be a stimulus, there's always going to be a response. The space in between those two things is where the freedom lies.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
we have it be that there's a stimulus and we immediately react every second, there's no freedom.
Yeah.
There's no space.
Yes. And you know what? I'll try, see if I can get an image of this in the show notes because it's a really great image. And the one I'm familiar with, which like, I don't know, I've done a lot of like trainings. So I get information from all different places. And I'll be honest, I don't remember I saw this one, but I'm going to try to find it. And it is that stimulus that you're talking about. There is the gap. And then there was actually two things coming off the gap. And one was response and one was reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And they really like, they differentiated between responding and reacting. So I think the reaction was like very close. There was like a teeny tiny sliver of a gap between the stimulus and the reaction. And then there was this big gap between the stimulus and the response. And I think what they were trying to indicate with this image was that the longer the space between the stimulus and what we choose to do, the greater the likelihood that we will respond versus react. And reaction is more, emotion based, right? It's just kind of gut reaction. You say things that you don't really mean, you do things that you don't really mean. You're just not really in your head making a calm, rational choice the way you are when you take that pause and respond. So I will try to put that in the show notes. That's a great image for people.
That's such a great image. I've never seen that be differentiated that way. And it will really hook people in because pairing it with a visual is so big.
Yeah.
It's like there were two things. And what you mentioned even before when you were talking about when you were talking to your kids and you were talking about being an octopus, like there were two things from that. So the first is we all can really visualize that. that idea
Yeah.
of like, and we all have been there,
Yeah.
some people listening right now may be feeling that way right now, listening and stirring the pot and signing the papers and doing the whole thing. And I had a friend who I said once, I'm like, I feel like an octopus and I hate it. I like literally said, I don't like feeling like an octopus. And she goes, well, we want to make you into a mermaid. And I start crying.
That's so good.
I start crying because I was at an incredibly high stress time in my life. And the idea of it seemed so amazing, yet it seemed so impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it stayed with me. And so whenever I get really stressed and I feel that way, I do close my eyes and I'll envision myself just morphing and shape shifting into a mermaid. And it's whatever works for you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I
Yeah.
feel like it is really important to understand that it's not a one size fits all. It's really, there is science, there is the way that we're made up for sure. And at the same time, even within that, there's a spectrum of people who really love novelty and people who really love certainty, people who really love being able to, have the freedom, and people who too much freedom, it makes them want to crawl off the wall because they're so like, give me some direction,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really just about knowing yourself more so that you can make more decisions that create space for you to respond in a way that feels more whole. Like there's this sense with personal and professional development, even with spirituality for a little, like, it can come in with that too, where I get really pissed off and like my rebellious streak comes out because I'm just like, it's really doing a disservice to covertly create this sense of continuous improvement, this sense of at the end it will be perfection, even if it's not said that way. Like the whole progress over perfection has been hitting the airwaves forever. Yet at the same time, everything connected to it is not, it's a very big social cognitive dissonance of like, go for progress over perfection. And then all of a sudden we get all these different messages that are leading towards perfection.
Right.
And there's no end spot. And so I get really annoyed and pissed and like sad and all the feels because I'm highly emotional, and I do bring that into coaching. I do bring that idea into like, what is right for you?
Yeah.
Like, let's cancel out everything else in our mind that we think we should be doing. Because the high achieving leaders, for anyone listening who falls into that, or even may know somebody or sees maybe their kids starting to fall into that, which can happen, there's so much pressure that they're putting on themselves, and they're metrics that are socially based. They're not even metrics that are truly fulfilling them. It's like a carrot kind of being dangled. And it's like, if you hit this metric and this metric and this, okay, hit all these, and then you're guaranteed this, fill in the blank. And it's not true.
Yeah, I know it's so not true. And anyone who's been in the corporate world long enough, we know that's not true. We might fool ourselves into thinking it's true, but it is definitely not true. And I guess what I would ask is, when you ask these leaders this question, well, I guess I have two questions. When you ask the leaders these questions, do they even know? When you say to them, like, what works for you or what's important to you? Are they like, I don't know. And then also, do you have people, and I think I fall into this category, that are so excited about their topics of interest that they overwhelm themselves, not out of shoulding, but out of wanting, because I'm just very excited about a lot of different things that I want to learn about and I want to try, and that kind of thing. And how do you rein those people in versus the people who are like, I don't know what I want or what I like?
Oh, it's so great. I love this question. So the first is, for the former, there is often this moment of like, and right away, that's curiosity. So if you really broke it down simply, best I can, when I'm in any coaching environment, even workshop environments too, is for me to lean more curious than judgmental, because I'm human. I have moments too where I catch myself like, oh my God, you're judging this. Oh, that's stuff you got to work on afterwards, because that just doesn't help right now.
Right.
But at the same time, it's important to have values and judgment, right? So judgment call is different than judging. We'll put that to the side. But then I also want to create that environment that they feel safe to be able to get curious. To so many leaders, and we do hear this more, I've been hearing this more and more, how we really can feel and trust the leaders who say, I don't know. Of course, you don't want leaders who say it constantly. That's
Right.
a problem, right? That's a little like, well, that doesn't make me feel safe to be in this,
Right. Mm-hmm.
At the same time, a leader who humbly and confidently goes, you know what? I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
is a leader I'd want to follow. And when I say
Right.
follow, I don't mean like followers. I mean, I would
Right.
want them to be in charge
Mm-hmm.
because I trust them. Like in that moment, I trust you more. So a lot of times when I say like, well, what does success mean to you? Or what does right mean to you? Like, well, I want to do it right. Then
Mm-hmm.
we start unpacking what that even looks like. And there's so much that opens
Mm-hmm.
there. It's like, I
Mm-hmm.
always say it's like the Russian dolls. Like you take one out, then you take another one, then you take
Yeah.
another. And then the smallest one is usually the most potent insight.
Oh, that's so good, Kristy. That is so good. Oh, I love that.
It's
Yeah.
so true. And I'll
Yeah.
share with you, like and just because this can be transferable, workplace, at home. There's one client that and this happens, realizing it happens with a few different, that it really is usually like the smallest insight that makes the biggest impact. We hear it all the time, but just to really give it a practical example, there was this moment, something got brought in to work on that was bigger. We pulled it back, and there was this moment where they were like, I didn't even realize that I had the choice of whether or not to answer the phone. I don't even think that I could choose to push it to voicemail or to not answer it or to pause. I am so instinctively grabbing my phone at work when and I don't realize that
Right.
the other person isn't always getting the best of me. They're getting sometimes a resentful part of me that's like, you're interrupting me, or I'm trying to be the octopus. And
Yeah.
so now I'm getting resentful, but I really want to be a helper, but I'm also resentful, and I'm going to
Yeah.
answer the phone. And that has been one of the greatest insights that they gleaned
Yeah.
from themselves being open to going, I don't know what it looks like, and exploring it. I look at it like my job is to really hold this sacred container for them to throw anything they want onto the table.
Yeah.
And for me not to blanch, for me to
Yeah.
go, okay,
Yeah.
first of all, congratulations, because that took so much. I mean, I always say like,
Yeah.
that took so much courage for you to do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they'll start crying, or a lot of times
Mm.
they'll, just, that did, you just see this kind of pride,
Yeah.
like, oh, they start breathing again. I mean,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It always reminds me of Brene Brown saying, if we heard everybody's story, we'd fall in love with everybody.
Yeah. So true.
Everybody's story is really, so that's why we podcast, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
just beautiful experience. But to answer your second question, this is a really fun one that anybody can do if they fall into that, because I'm right there with you. I am very enthusiastic. I am a 7. I am a 7 in the Enneagram. So
Okay.
we're talking about Enneagram before, and 7s are the enthusiasts. They
Okay.
also can be incredibly scattered because they get like their hands into all the pots.
Yeah.
Focus was something I've been working on very strongly for the last 5 years, of like how to focus in and realize it's okay. I don't have to do everything all at once.
Right.
So if someone comes in and they're like super excited, they're like, this is what I want to work on. And maybe they have 3 things, like, I'm going to nail these things. The first thing we do is I have them write down like, okay, I want to what? And they write out what they just told me. And then they write out 5 because. So they'll say like, I want to be better at speaking up in meetings. And then I'll have them write because, fill in the blank, because, and they'll do that 5 times. And they
Okay.
usually say like 5 times. I'm like, 5 times, just see what happens, see what comes up.
Yeah.
And if they feel still connected to this, because what 2 things usually happen. Either one, it really actually brings them down into a rooted, grounded, confident, focused, fierce place versus this frenetic excitement of newness and possibility, it anchors it for them to go, wow, this is really important to me. I didn't even, and sometimes they get emotional. Like sometimes there is this moment of like, oh, wow, I didn't even realize that's the reason I want to speak. Okay. It's so important to me.
Yeah.
Right. Other times they're like, oh, I don't even think this is what I want to focus on. Wait, is that, and then there's always a follow-up like, is that okay? And so there are these two beautiful experiences that happen. One is that they learn in that moment to strengthen their trust in their intuition, because now they're sensing what is true to them, which goes beyond feeling like emotion. It's sensing that internal, right?
Yeah.
And the second is they start trusting their choices, because, and it does air gender bias. There are more female than male who go, is that right? Is that okay? And I'll say, is that okay to you? And they'll go, I'm like, it's so like, what would happen if I looked at you and I go, no, that's not okay. Here's the thing. I want you to, and then sometimes we play around with that. Like, let's play with that. Let's play with me saying that wasn't okay. And I want you to listen inside and notice what happens. And then when I say it is okay, I want you to just sense what happens. And then sometimes we have a whole session on that.
Yeah. It's complicated because depending on your personality type, if you say to someone with a certain personality, no, that's not okay, that might make them want to do it all the more. And then if you say to them, it is okay, that might be like, yeah, that's all right. Like, so I guess you have to play with it both ways and know their style to know why they're responding in the way that they're responding. Go ahead.
Yeah. And for them to know, I mean, to me, it's more them knowing more of themselves.
Yeah.
Because if they, and I'm laughing because when you were like, you know, if you tell someone it's okay, they're going to want to do the opposite. I was like, hi, that's what I can be so stubborn. I'm so like, oh yeah, well, try.
Yeah, watch me.
Try, you know? But I feel like it's important because there is something true about the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. Yeah. So where in that instance with this person, could there be a little bit of an authority challenge? And let's unpack that.
Yeah.
If you want to. And sometimes they say, I don't want to. Right. And then and then that's where I feel like I've grown as a coach, because before I used to go, okay, and like drop it.
Yeah.
And now if I notice as a pattern that type of comment comes up and it keeps getting pushed to the side, I look at it as my duty for them to go, listen, you know what, Katie, I noticed, can I share a pattern? I do ask that. Can I share? And they usually say yes, sometimes with like one eye open, but they're like, sure. I notice every time we talk about a little bit of a challenge that you may have with authority, it gets pushed to the side. What do you think about that?
Yeah.
And then, and I might even say now, like, I look at it like my responsibility when I see it's a disservice to you if I don't bring that up. We don't have to cover anything you don't want to cover. I just think it's important for you to gain insight where when we're so in our head, we're so blinded.
Right.
So many reasons people hire coaches or therapists or even talk to good friends is because they're outside of it and they just can see they don't have the same fears that we have about what's happening.
Right. Yeah. We're all too close to it, right? We're just too close to the situation and we can't see what's that very old expression, the forest through the trees.
Yes.
You just can't see it. You need the drone view. You need someone to like come hover above and watch the situation, take it all in, and then come down to you and be like, hey, I was up there. This is what I saw while I was up there.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so good. And so do you work with teams as well, or just you go in just a leader, or you do the leader and then leaders people underneath?
I do both. So I work with teams and I work one-on-one. What I've been loving doing recently is doing one-on-one hybrid with small group coaching. Okay. So working with management, one-on-one, and then bringing them together with some of their teammates for a monthly group session for them to share insights and also for them to share, like, what have you noticed in each other? since
Yeah.
you've started coaching.
Yeah.
And it's a humbling moment for the person who's in the hot seat. And it's also a very enlightening moment. And it's a super connective moment
Yeah.
because it creates this sense of psychological safety that was popularized. She may have even created it, Amy Edmondson. She really is known for this idea of psychological safety in the workplace. And it's pretty much what it sounds like. Like if you're around a table at a meeting and you have an idea or a thought, or even if you want to challenge something someone said, do you feel safe enough that you can do that? Or do you feel there's going to be some sort of negative consequence from doing that?
Yeah.
And so, and that happens, and it's very insidious in a lot of different ways. And it just can, like, I always use the example, like, it's not even necessarily the person who is like very overtly disagreeing. It's also if we were in a meeting and say Joe spoke up and you and I did an across the table eye exchange. It's so obnoxious. And I get so sad for Joe. I'm like, oh, this is not helping. Like that, so we work on that, and it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for every leader. But yeah, I do. And then I also do departments. I'll go in. I've been really working recently to go deep and wide with companies, just a few companies at a time, so that it can really be, working with their managers, then working with the individual contributors, and working with the leadership above, so that it just feels more holistic and more democratized. Because it does affect everything. Like, I know your podcast is really geared towards moms, and at the same time, the majority of them are moms, have friends who are moms. Like, there's a big connection there. And there is a big difference of the pressure and the expectations that are put on specifically mom and moms who are working. So I really work with those clients to just allow them to give themselves grace and space to put some things down. So when we were going back to the question about like people who come in who are excited about a goal they want to hit, we'll do the same exercise for them with like the pressure they're putting on themselves. Like, I want this, why? And then they can start just sieving through like this. Actually, at the end of the day, I want connection with my kids. Okay. Well, it doesn't have to come from, bringing the best dessert in you're like proving it could, for Valentine's Day or whatever it is, St. Patrick's Day. But it's more about understanding why you're doing that. So because I want this, I want connection. Okay, cool. So what can that look like? And then they start realizing like, oh, it really can look so different than I expected. And it can be so much more quality. It can be when we're in the car on the way to soccer practice, or dropping them off, if they're babysitting, if they're at that age, and I can talk to them then and have connection. And it's quality over quantity every single time. It's, and the more aware you are, like there's so much that is science-based that goes with the mental health of the parent is essential. When you probably have covered this many a times on your show, like it has to start there. So this idea of self-care with moms specifically, that I don't even love the term self-care anymore because I just feel like it's so diluted because it's been used so often, but it's more like knowing that it is essential that you get yourself into a mental state that feels depressurized, that feels more at ease, that feels more confident, that feels more like whatever you need it to feel like, so that your kids then benefit from that. It's not, I'm done saying it's selfish. I'm done with this bizarre competitiveness. Like, you think you're hard on you, Katie. I'm so hard on you. You're so hard on you, Joanne. You're like, no, it's not helping with us trying to say how hard we are on each other, to up each other. Like, it's okay to go, I took a nap for 20 minutes. Like,
and it was fantastic.
Fantastic. And I'll tell you right now, like when my kids come home from school, when I transition from working to when they're home, I know myself. I need 10 minutes offline, and I don't just mean within the, computer, to transition so that I can transition to that role of mom.
Yeah.
So I'll take a nap, or I'll sit there and do nothing, or I'll listen to a song, or literally nothing. And I don't feel like it's indulgent.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a privilege. I absolutely know it's a privilege. I don't feel it's indulgent. I feel like I am doing a service to myself and to my kids, because when I don't have that space in between, they don't get a great part of me.
Version of you. Yeah.
I do. I will feel sometimes like they're interrupting me, like it's an interruption. And I do get that kind of mosquito flicking kind of energy. And then what happens? Then there's the mom shame and the mom guilt, and you're crying in the shower. You're crying and I'm talking about myself. I'm not even talking about that. I was like, or you're crying when you go to bed at night, like, oh my God, I was so mean when they came home from school. And it's gotta stop.
Yeah. I love that. I like that idea that it is a privilege, but like a necessary privilege. For years, I work in healthcare, and I have always thought, like, why is healthcare a privilege? Like, why, in order to get the best care, you have to have a certain type of job that supplies a certain amount of health insurance, and even once you do, it's a lot. If you have any health issues, it's very costly out of pocket, even if you have a good job and you have quote unquote good health insurance. And food was the other one. I'm like, food, like what? That should be a right, right? Healthy, nutritious food should be a right. That should not be a privilege, but it is a privilege in our society. And good healthcare that doesn't break the bank should be a right, not a privilege, but it is. And this, internal work that we're talking about doing, for some people, it's really hard to access because of whatever else is going on in their life. But it should be a right. It shouldn't be a privilege. And we should be pushing the needle towards that every single day. And the whole premise of my show is that exactly what you said, like, your kids are going to get the very best version of you when you do your own work first. It starts with you first and it trickles down to them. So I really believe in like moving this this culture forward, where we first say should be a right. This is something that every woman should have access to every single day, and here's the different ways that you can access it for yourself, depending on your lifestyle and what speaks to you and all these different things. But that it's not self-indulgent. It's not only for certain people who have certain stations in our culture. Like, it should be for everyone every day, and everyone in your family should know about it, that this is what mama needs, and you're going to help me do it, right? Just like when the kitchen needs to be cleaned up, I'm like, you're all helping me. Let's get on board. I'm not the only one doing this. Like, there should be awareness in your family that this is happening, and you're going to help me make it happen by not interrupting you when I'm trying to do a meditation or read a book or whatever the case may be, however, you want to set it up. But I 100% agree with you. And it's the same at work. I think that, like, you were talking about how, if I don't bring the cupcakes in and I'm not the perfect parent, and there's a cultural expectation of what being a good mom is. And I think there's also a cultural expectation about what being a good leader is. And that model is designed for men. It's much more designed for men. So men still need all this work, 100%. But I think women need a greater shift in the working world when it comes to being able to lead in a way that's authentic to them. Do you see that?
I feel it's a yes. And I just want to go back, because you worded that so articulately about pretty much democratizing a genuine sense of mental wellness for people.
Yeah,
I want to just pause on that, because it's so important. And the wellness industry has been so commodified, and it's become the super consumer, like it's gone off the charts. And so I just feel like simplify it as much as possible. And that's why I really lean into helping people de-woo intuition. I get my foot in the door with the leadership language, and it is a huge part of it. Underneath it, I do have a little bit of an agenda to help people de-woo intuition, so that they can listen in about what they need. not
Mhm.
from what they think they should need or that they
Yeah.
think they should meditate. If they're like, I actually really hate meditating, great. Then just sit there with a cup of tea for 5 minutes and drink your tea and daydream, or
Yeah.
start creative writing, or go for, or do something that for you refills your cup.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be this, like, yes, there's science to meditating. There's also science to creative writing or day. I mean,
Mhm.
there's just trust yourself,
Yeah.
trust yourself. So that's the first thing, normalizing it.
Mhm.
The second thing I'll say is that I feel that, um, I feel men and women have a lot of pressure on themselves in society. And I am all about strengthening women's place in leadership roles. I also feel like we need to take the pressure off of men that isn't as talked about. I don't think it's as discussed that men actually do have a lot of pressure on them behind closed doors.
Mhm.
And women, we're community creatures. We do have a tendency to communicate more what we need very naturally. We have a tendency to be more tribal naturally, even though we
Mhm.
all need a tribe of some sort. And there's a lot of freaking pressure on men to be this lone wolf, to act like they don't need anybody, to act like when they're at the top, they got it together, they're cool as a cucumber, steady as a rock. When
Mhm.
underneath, they could be crumbling, and
Yeah.
we don't know that. So
Mhm.
I love working with men and women. I
Yeah.
think it's incredibly important that they learn how to really become this wholeness within their masculine and feminine energy, because
Mhm.
we're all over extending masculine energy wise, just with this doing and
Yeah.
active and doing and active. And
Mhm.
the feminine energy is getting so depleted, this sense of
Yeah.
taking in, processing, sitting back for a minute, being creative,
Mhm.
listening in,
Yeah.
being patient. Like, we all have it. It's not gender. I mean, it's just from being a human being. If you have a
Yeah.
pulse, you have feminine and masculine energy.
Yes.
So I do feel like, and I don't know if I'm answering your question
No,
about,
I think you are. You are. And you bring up a good point. And men absolutely have their own set of pressures. I just look at a system that I feel like was designed for a man to work within. Like, so, I had my babies at like 12 weeks. After each baby, I was back working full
I,
time.
yes,
There was pumping in the closet corner, like I'm I'm coming in on absolutely zero sleep because I was
yes,
breastfeeding. So I was the one up at night feeding the baby. Women still continue to have the majority of the share of housework at home and child rearing, but they're still being asked to perform at the level of a man that is maybe not doing all those things. And again, these are generalizations. This is not
yes,
every home and every family,
yes,
but there's very good scientific evidence out there, studies that show that still the majority of kid and home relies on
falls on the
moms.
woman.
And just in 2020, during the pandemic, the majority of people who left their jobs were women because
Yes.
they cracked. It was like, I was barely hanging on. And now you want me to homeschool my kid? Like, I can't do it. And so we lost so many people from the workforce because it is a system that was built and designed for men.
Yeah,
And so
I think it's very complex.
it is complex. I would just like to see, just like you can say, there's no one way to be a good mom. I want to see us say, there's no one way to be a good leader either. And I
Yes.
don't need to I don't need to check every box that society says I need to check in order to be successful at doing this. I can choose my own path that works better for me and my family and still be as, if not more, successful in doing it. And, like you said, you wanted them to tap into their intuition. And you said it's usually the woman who's like, is that okay? Right? Because we've been enculturated to not trust our own intuition. So we need women to come back and be like, hell yeah, that's right. Like, I
Yes.
feel it and I know it and I'm going to do it.
I think it's
Um,
I think it's a combo. From what you're saying, I feel like women again, and again, this is not every single person, because I already was thinking of like different scenarios when you were speaking. I was like, oh yeah, and totally. I mean, the data's there regarding the pandemic for sure. At the same time, to your point of women saying to me, and not every woman, but clients saying like, is that okay that I chose this? Or I also think men have not been given the right to say that out loud. They have to act like they have their shit together.
Mm.
So internally, they might be like, I have no idea what the hell she's talking about, but I'm not going to say that because I want to have, like, what does that say to me about me as a leader, my
Right.
identity? And if I really do, like, I think I kind of get her intuition thing, but if I admit that, so I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of internalizing that a lot of guys do, even the
Yeah.
real charming and, charismatic, they know how to do the snappy snap, like internally, it's usually a different story, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the woman on the outside who's like, is that okay? Internally, there's a warrior who's sitting there like, I'm ready when you are. I'm
Yeah.
waiting for your cue because
Yeah.
let's get this going. And unfortunately, it usually is when something happens in our lives that creates this really intense ultimatum of like, shit or get off the pot. Like this,
Yeah.
it's time right now.
Yeah.
So my hope is to encourage people to wake up so it's a choice and it's not a force for them to have to make that change.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's complex. Yes, that a lot of women, I'm going to speak on behalf of me because I'll say this. I am divorced and when I looked back, I always say like divorce is this, I don't recommend that people get divorced. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, yeah, no, that's not what the point is. But I kind of, joke that like you get this little box when you get divorced with this beautiful red ribbon and you open it up and it's like Mary Poppins, like it morphs into this huge mirror and you're faced with looking at yourself and you can crash it to the ground. And then it's like a million pieces of yourself looking at, or you can take a look in it. And I feel like everybody hits one of those moments, whether it's divorce or if it's a death or if it's a major change where you're forced to choose to either look at yourself or not. And I know that when I look back and I was very, without realizing it, influenced socially to this inner tug of war of like, I want to be there for my kids. Yet I'm going to be a little bit of a martyr. Yeah, I'm kind of resentful. Yet I also want to be in control. Yet if I do want to work more than be home with my kids, what does that say about me as a mom? Like there was just a plethora of things that came out where I was like, this is like a funhouse mirror. Like I had no idea all of that was in there, and that was a huge awakening to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like, so I'm saying that from when I was married, like I realized afterwards, like all of that was going on.
Yeah.
So I do feel that we have so much happening inside of ourselves and we really need one person. And I am biased that I feel like having someone who is unbiased in your life, who has no vested interest is hugely important as one option. I don't think it's the only option. I think it's wonderful to have a partner that you can really be intimate and speak to and and it's this partner, like this friend. And then also having a good friend or another loved one and having an unbiased, unvested interest therapist or coach. Like we need a bunch of people. Like I always say like it takes a village to raise a human, not just a child.
Yes, that's great.
Right.
Yeah.
But like having someone who you can be really honest with, because, Katie, like if you wanted to do something that was going to somehow impact your husband's life, maybe you do have the relationship that you could talk to him about it. But maybe you also don't want to scare the shit out of them. And you're like, you know what? I need to talk. Oh, but I can't talk to that good friend because they care about me. And then you're like, okay, I need a coach. I need someone who just they care. They have 100% care and 100% unvested interest in the outcome. So
I totally agree.
Just so that you could be that honest. So that you could, oh my God, I really want to continue to work. But at the same time, beyond finances, I'm really scared of my identity being threatened as a mom. Am I choosing work over my kids? Like that's a huge challenge that we face as moms.
Yeah. No, it is. And like you said, your partner or your friends are going to have their own biases and their own vested interests and they're all wonderful. I call it like tools in the toolkit. Like it's just all different tools in your toolkit of development and learning, but having that unbiased, like you're saying, coach, therapist, someone who is unvested, can take the drone view and then can come back down and unpack what they saw for you. And then you get to decide what you do with that. You know, you get to
Yes.
decide how you want to proceed forward, but at least you have the information, because we can't make any shifts or changes if we're not aware of what's going on. And then that awareness we can decide how we want to move forward with it. So I love that. How do you begin this process? Like when you go into a company, do you have a certain, like, I don't know how to explain it, but like, do you have a plan? Like this week we're going to focus on this, and then this week we're going to focus on this, or is it more kind of client led? You go in, you have a conversation, you see what they're seeking, and then each week is like a little bit different based on where they are.
It's a combination. So I do have a frame because it's helpful. I noticed that it's helpful because a lot of people are like, I don't even know where to go here. It
Yeah.
always makes me think of a therapist I had years ago said, even Jello needs a mold.
Uh,
It's, it's like,
I love these little things that like help you remember. I love them. That's so great.
so it's like that creativity, like, and that's really what they're doing when they're in session is they're using their like problem solving is inherently creative. So anybody who's like, I'm not creative, I would challenge that. But what I do is I have an energy leadership assessment that I have them take ahead of time. So we spend the first few sessions debriefing on that. It's an in-depth debrief that we go through. It's based on a framework that is 7 levels of energy. And then they get to see where they are when they're under a lot of stress and when things are going good to great. And then they get to choose from there what they want to do about it. Are there certain levels that they want to change more and have that be more of a sustained baseline? Is there something that popped up that made them go, huh? From our conversation of the debrief, I really want to focus on this. I realize I really do want to be more visible at work, but I'm really nervous about it. Great. So they may have ideas ahead of time of like, what's the first thing you want to work on when we work together? And then I'll circle back to that. I'll go, okay, so just to keep in mind, here's what you initially said, which ones stand true and which ones from the debrief have shifted. And then we compile them all again, and then they prioritize from there.
Okay.
And then every week or every other, it's usually every other week. Sometimes now I work with some people monthly, although I really prefer every other week because it keeps the momentum going.
Yeah.
We'll build off from the previous session. I'll check in with them in between. I always say, like, is there somewhere I'll tell them, I'll say, I'm going to check in from last time. I also want to see, is there something specific you want to focus on? Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. And I'll say, okay, so let's go back to either your original goal. What's the progress there? Or from last time this came up, what have you noticed? Any insights gleaned, And I've been using too, which I know you're familiar with, the Voxer app, which has been great.
Yeah, Voxer's fantastic.
It's fantastic. It's such an awesome way in between for those listeners who aren't familiar. It's like a walkie-talkie app, but you can do audio, you can do text, you can do
send
images, documents. So I'll say to them, like, hey, in between, you might be about to have a conversation and you just want to do a quick Voxer, like, hey, any thoughts on this? I'm about to give feedback to a direct report, or I'm about to have a conversation for my annual review, or they might share with me a random win, they might like send me like, this was awesome, so it's to keep the momentum going.
In between, they have that touchstone to you, which is awesome. Exactly. And there's something about the voice that can't be beat, in my opinion. I mean, text is fine and email is fine, but really hearing the emotion behind the words. There's just really something with that. I'm really trying to convince all my friends. I'm like, get on Voxer. I don't want to text you anymore. I want to hear your voice,
Yes.
Okay, that's awesome. And we talked about, and you kind of mentioned it in the beginning of what you were explaining, and we don't have time to get into it, but I will definitely be doing a show on the Enneagram. But this, like, who am I when I am at my best, and who am I when I am struggling more? And you're going to be incorporating some of that Enneagram work into your coaching.
Yes, it's a totally holistic, it's such a beautiful organic add-on. And I really, at the end of the day, Katie, I just look at it like the more we can raise our awareness about ourselves without aiming for perfection and just aiming for more self-compassion, like, yeah, I didn't show up the best for my kids that day. That's okay. Give yourself a break. And at the same time, realize that actually, as counterintuitive as it is, will have you show up better next time.
Yeah. And what do you think, last question, because what do you think about the fact that, because I would imagine that you go in, you do some of this work, you guys complete your work, And then do you ever get follow-up where a client is like, guess what? I thought it was the last doll, but actually I discovered two more dolls under there. And like the fact that holding this balance between you don't need to stress about it, there is no pressure, you can take all the shoulds out of it, but the work really never ends because we are constantly evolving humans that are changing and having different experiences, and we're in different phases of our life, and it's okay that the work is never done and that we don't have to have any expectation that it will ever be done. We just like kind of take it for what it is and try to have fun with it and enjoy the process. Is that something you guys talk about?
Enjoying the process?
Yeah, enjoying the
Totally.
process.
So
Yeah.
I'll say briefly that what you were saying before, like, oh, do I ever get follow-ups? Yeah, sometimes there is, and other times I'm gonna be completely straight to the point. Every coach is not for everybody, nor should they be. It's a saturated market for good reason, because then you have a better chance of really vetting through and finding the coach for you. I am not a SMART goal metric oriented traditional coach. I want you to reach your goals. There's definitely a psychological human behavior component to it when you're working with me. It's not for everybody. Some people are like, this is way too much. I'm not into this. I want just to hit my goals and keep moving. And I want someone to hold me accountable. And I have references that I say, awesome, I'm going to have you, connect with this person and you can be off and running. But for those who are like, this is so much different than I thought, but I'm kind of excited about it because I'm learning more about me. Totally. Or they might get in touch with me and go, I didn't even know that this was happening. And I literally heard myself. Like I'll tell you two things briefly. So one is I had one client who was like, I'm so excited. I was in the house the other day and I heard myself say, I hate myself. And I was so happy.
You're like, good job, awareness. Yeah.
I did.
It's
I go,
amazing.
I've never been happier to hear you say that.
Yeah. So
And
proud. I'm so proud.
Hysterically laughing. I said, because you want to know what? Do you know how many people are saying that to themselves and either A, embarrassed to admit it, or two, don't even realize they don't even realize they're looping that right now. And you just unlooped the soundtrack. Like, awesome. Yeah. The second thing I'll say to end on a higher note to answer your question about enjoyment is that I had a wonderful conversation a few years ago on my podcast with a woman named Jackie Leonardini, who's a soul coach. She was in certification. She shared the story on the podcast. While she was in certification for soul coaching, we all have to put ourselves in the hot seat as the client, and it's brutal. We're asking people to do this. This is horrible. So she got to a point where she was just like, this sucks. Like, I can't believe I'm going to actually ask people to do this. And her mentor looked at her and said, it's because you're abusing yourself instead of amusing yourself. Amuse yourself and don't abuse yourself and see what happens. And I was like, yep.
Oh my God, that's so good. I'm so glad that came out. That is fantastic. Yes, amuse yourself, have fun, and make it light. Whatever comes. Like, it's there anyway. Like, it's there anyway. So you might as well lighten it and have fun with it. Yeah, so good. I'm gonna take that. Do you have a name of someone who said that so I can directly quote them?
Yes, I'll send it to you. It's Jackie Leonardini. She's on Instagram too, and she's wonderful. And again, it really does come down to realizing that there are going to be some things that are heavier, that you're not feeling that way. But the more that you can humanize it, and that really is one of the tenets of self-compassion, like there's shared humanity, that there are 8 billion people in the world. There is at least 1 million people in that moment that my client said, I heard myself saying, I hate myself, who are also saying, like, you're not alone, and the more you can realize, like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. And also this isn't even my thought. This is someone else's thought. Then we can start paying attention to, like, oh, what are my thoughts? Oh, I'm going to get curious. Like, what are the thoughts I want to have?
Yes, which is a lot about meditation. That's a lot of what meditation is. It's
that's your wheelhouse.
Yes. That's my wheelhouse. Yeah, witnessing the thoughts without judgment, just being curious. And I will sometimes be meditating and find myself having a thought, and actually, which is, most people will be like, that's very anti-meditation, but it's really not. I will actually start laughing at myself because I witnessed this thought come up. I'm like, Oh my God, Katie, get it together. I mean, it's funny. The brain, the crazy neighbor upstairs, does really funny things. And it's okay because we all have one. We all have a crazy neighbor that lives upstairs, and he or she is just like doing their thing. And it's not indicative of who we are as humans. Like, it's not our soul. It's just this,
Yeah. And the more you can
honestly,
notice it and the more you
yeah.
can name it and the more you can just go, oh, that's just Gladys upstairs.
Yeah.
Oh, she's so,
Yes.
and you just think of it like an old lady with a cane who's got
Yeah.
one of those like house dresses on and,
Yes.
you know, you just make that inner critic version of yourself just so
Yeah.
ridiculous that you can name it. That's one of the biggest
Yes.
pieces, like name it to tame it. So it's
Yes.
Dan Siegel, Dr. Dan Siegel has
Oh,
said, name
that's
it to tame
great. That's great. Both my kids have pretty significant anxiety, and they both, when they were in therapy, had to draw pictures of their anxiety and name this. They drew monsters, but name what the monster had a name.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
Oh,
Well, thank you,
beautiful.
Kristy. Thank you so much for being on. I will put all the information in the show notes about how people can reach you if they're interested in working with you. I think you're doing just really amazing work, and the world is a better place for it. So I really appreciate you and what you do.
Oh, Katie, thank you so much. And ditto to you. And I want to give a shout out to you that you're also on my podcast. So you'll share that so that you
Yes.
can shine a light on the incredible work you're doing as well.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. I had a podcast this morning with a Zen master, and he said, don't say have a, and here goes the don't again, but don't say have a good day, have an aware day. So Kristy, have an aware day.
Thank you. I will.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, I ask that you please like the show, follow, subscribe, or share. The way that podcasts work is the more people that do one of those things, the more likely it is that when someone's looking for a podcast to listen to, our show will pop up for them. I started this podcast because I really see there's a great need in our world for people to feel more peace, joy, love, and acceptance in their lives. And I think we can do that when we have a greater sense of self-awareness. We could become conscious creators of our own lives. And I'm seeking to do that for as many people as possible. So if you could help me by liking, sharing, or subscribing to the show, I'd really appreciate it. And hopefully someone hears a conversation that changes their life. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time. Much love.